Those who love peace quote the sixth commandment and say war is unethical, for it is written, "Thou shalt not kill." But this is a mistranslation. The sixth commandment says, "Thou shalt not murder." This is a big difference. Self-defense is permitted in the Bible, and to fight evil is in fact the duty of every human being. Lo tirzach, thou shalt not murder, not lo taharog, thou shalt not kill. If you do not understand that there is a fundamental difference, not a difference in numbers of casualties, but a fundamental difference, between the terrorist murderer who decapitates babies in front of their parents or burns them together alive, and the person who tries to defend his people from those monstrous atrocities against an enemy who uses their own people as a human shield. If you do not understand that the murderous terrorist and the defender are two fundamentally different categories, then you are either brainwashed or lack any human decency. In either case, you don't need to watch the rest of the video. You will not understand it anyway. For those who do understand this and want to know more, this video is for you. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. Note that the word hate here does not mean baseless hate, but to abhor what is evil. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, Proverbs 8:13. This will be explained in detail later in the video. From a spiritual perspective, we always need to seek balance of complementary opposites. In the Qabbalah and in the Bible, the principle of mercy and loving kindness is called reset in Hebrew, and the principle of power and justice is called Gevurah in Hebrew. They are complementary opposites. Check out our previous videos about these principles. Links in the description. Both principles are holy, and both have a virtue and a vice. The vice of Gevurah, power, is the terrorist and murderer. It is cruelty and baseless hate. It is easy to call for the principle of love instead, because we want humanity to love each other. But the vice of reset, mercy, is weakness that tolerates evil and masquerades as love and understanding. It's the passive bystander who allows the murderer or terrorist to continue their evil. A mother who knows that her child is abused and does nothing about it is at least as bad as the abuser. A truly spiritual and ethical person cannot remain neutral in the face of injustice and terrorism. In the words of Thomas Mann, who said 1941 about Nazi Germany, "Wer nicht gegen das Übel ist, leidenschaftlich und mit ganzer Seele dagegen, der ist mehr oder weniger dafür. Anyone who is not passionately and wholeheartedly against evil is more or less in favor of it." We must not allow terrorists to weaponize our own ethical principles against us. If we do, it is the vice of reset, of misplaced mercy, that has become foul and evil and creates the environment for evil to grow. And if evil grows because of that, we are guilty of allowing it to do so. Given only the choice to allow terrorists to shoot and rape your own family and behead your babies, or risking to injure or kill the family of the terrorist whom he uses as a human shield, we must choose to protect our own. This is the virtue of Gevurah, justice. And if the human shields and their relatives and their allies morally try to defend the terrorists, then we cannot be sure that the human shields have not willingly chosen, or at least accepted to be in this position. Recent polls before and even shortly after October 7 have shown that still 70% of the people in Gaza support Hamas and 95% hate the Jews. So if they are paying a price for their hate, it is their karma and the result of their actions. The West is all too willing to believe the lies of organizations like Hamas, another form of the vice of reset. Recently, Hamas fired a rocket on Israel, which ended up on a hospital in Gaza. They blamed the destruction of the hospital on Israeli military forces, which is very unlikely because they are extremely precise. But nevertheless, the Western media accepted the story as if Hamas was a trustworthy source. The BBC shamefully does not even call the Hamas terrorists, while they had no problem to use that term for a much smaller attack in Belgium. Words have power, and if you do not condemn evil, you are, as Thomas Mann said, condoning the evil, and that makes you a part of the evil. Have you seen the pictures of those Hamas terrorists who have abducted Israeli women, undressed them and abused them? Do you know that they have abducted children as young as 2 years old? These people are animals, not human beings. In fact, to call them animals is unjust. We need to call them monsters. We stand with humanity. And that means we do not stand with those monsters, not with those who support them, or those who do anything to make them seem less like the monsters they are. If we want to end evil, we have to call it evil, and we have to draw a clear dividing line between that which is evil and sick, and that which is healthy and good. Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, Chapter 71. Knowing ignorance is strength. Ignoring knowledge is sickness. If one is sick of sickness, then one is not sick. The sage is not sick because he is sick of sickness. Therefore, he is not sick. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Proverbs 8:13. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Isaiah 5:20. While expressed slightly differently, it is not just the teachings of the Bible, but universal wisdom that we must call out evil or sick for what it is. Otherwise we become part of it. We must be sick of it. We must say we will not have it, and we don't accept that it is tolerated, or that the dividing line between good and evil is distorted. Yes, we are all not flawless, but we are not terrorists or murderers. These terrorists are surely also the enemies of every peace-loving human being, including all decent Muslims, and any attempt to make it less clear who is the offender and who is the victim is evil in itself. The UN Secretary General said that the attack of Hamas didn't happen in a vacuum, and that is supposed to sort of justify the attack of Hamas. If the degree of oppression you have suffered justified your actions, no matter how many innocent people die, then shouldn't the Jewish people who have been oppressed for millennia be equally justified no matter what measures they took? They were driven out of their homeland, scattered over the world, and been massacred many times through history, including the Holocaust, and including many terrorist attacks on civilians that happened in the state of Israel on a regular basis. And if you are not willing to allow the same rights you allow for Hamas, a terrorist organization, to the state of Israel, an ally of the Western world, doesn't that simply mean you apply double standards? And if so, isn't that just anti-Semitism that cowardly hides behind moral relativism? Moral relativism is just an indirect way of saying that you have no moral principles. Nothing ever happens in a vacuum, and if the fact that something didn't happen in a vacuum justifies anything, then everything is justifiable. That's absurd. The argument to defend the pure evil of the recent massacres by saying that it did not happen in a vacuum is with reference to the supposed suppression of the so-called Palestinians for some decades. But that argument is inherently fallacious, not only because if you check the facts there is no oppression, and Jews always lived in Israel despite that this is not often mentioned. And if you doubt that, watch the videos in our playlist and check the facts yourself. Do watch them and check the facts before you claim otherwise. But more so, the argument is fallacious because of the suppression of the Jewish people for several millennia and the constant terrorist attacks on the state of Israel. If a history of oppression justifies anything, then you have just destroyed any argument for any criticism of the Jewish people. Make up your mind. But unless you apply double standards, this justification for Hamas simply falls apart. But evil people do not stop here. They have double standards. That is, their standards for what defines oppression is different for Hamas than for the Jews. Just as the world and all the major women's organizations have different standards for condemning rape of Jewish women than for everybody else. Even the UN has different standards for so-called Palestinians and for Israel. With different standards, you can apparently justify everything. This is why it is the essence of every evil philosophy. The Bible is very clear that all forms of double standards must be condemned. Proverbs, chapter 20:10, divers weights and divers measures, both of them alike, are an abomination to the Lord. 2023, divers weights are an abomination to the Lord, and a false balance is not good. Deuteronomy 25:13, 16:13. Thou shalt not have in thy bag diverse weights, a great and a small. 14. Thou shalt not have in thy house diverse measures, a great and a small. 15. A perfect and just weight shalt thou have. A perfect and just measure shalt thou have, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. 16. For all that do such things, even all that do unrighteously, are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. Leviticus 24:22-22. Ye shall have one manner of law, as well for the stranger as for the homeborn, for I am the Lord your God. Without double standards, there can be no moral equivalence between murderous terrorism and self-defense. We all need to condemn the terrorism of Hamas. without implying any moral equivalence to Israel's self-defense, who tries everything possible to avoid civil casualties. We need to condemn Hamas without adding any but. If we don't, even if we live as far away as Europe or America, we help Hamas to continue to use our own ethics against us. There are no two sides to condemning terrorism. The terrorist who murders babies and the soldier who tries to stop him or bring him to justice are like darkness and light. Darkness is not equal to light. It is just the absence of light, and it cannot become light. But those who do not understand this may weaken the light and dim it, and this is what allows darkness to enter. Do not weaken the light. Do not allow evil to enter. Even in mythology, this is the case. Have you ever wondered why the myth says that a vampire cannot enter a house unless invited? It is the weak, well-meaning vice of reset, of misplaced mercy and misplaced loving kindness that invites evil into society. Let's not do that. When people in all seriousness find excuses for people burning babies alive and fail to condemn them as evil, then all that is good is at stake. A famous 1946 post-war confessional prose by the German Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller says, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. This time they came for the Jews first, and when they are done with Israel, they will come for everybody else." You don't believe that? They have stated many times that that is what they want to do. They have stated their intention to kill all Jews, all Americans and the whole Western world.
اللهم عليك باليهود ومن والاهم اللهم عليك بالأمريكان ومن والاهم اللهم احصهم عددا واقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
But even though they say this openly, people don't believe it, and are even seduced to justify their murders out of misplaced compassion. We have to understand that the virtue of Gevurah, of power and justice, is good. Gevurah is the defender of the light. We need him as much as we need compassion. It is the one who goes to war with evil. It is Michael who defeats Satan, also known as Samael, the angel of Israel against the angel of death. Yes, Samael or Satan is the angel of death, and Michael the angel of Israel. The Jewish religion loves life. In fact, the Hebrew word for life is a common Jewish symbol. And what we see is literally the fight of Israel against those who, in their own words, love death. How much more obvious can it be who is good and who is evil? It is not complicated or complex. The people who burn babies alive, or kill them in front of their parents, and who rape women are the bad guys. There is nothing complicated about this. But people try to erase the obvious difference between good and evil. Interestingly, amongst the foremost ones who justify this form of evil are the radical left. Are you aware that these are the same people who also justify pedophiles dancing half-naked in front of kindergartners?
In the Villa Vida on the left side of Vienna, the Queen's Brunch will take place on April 16th. A drag children's show with drag performances, thus stories of love and adventure, i.e. men dressed in women's clothes and boys jumping around.
And the same people who try to mass seduce us to be unable to remember the difference between a man and a woman. The same people who try to shame and cancel us if we disagree, and who subject our minors to chemical castration and surgical mutilation for the profit of Big Pharma. It is also the same people who try to attack and cancel us if we uphold traditional ethical values. It is the same people who already sit at our highest institutions of learning and cannot bring themselves to state that calling for the genocide of Jews is immoral.
The answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
It'd be hard to believe if it wasn't on tape, but Representative Elise Stefanik asked what should have been an easy question to answer, but MIT President Sally Kornbluth, UPenn President Liz McGill, and Harvard President Claudine Gay couldn't bring themselves to call chants for genocide of the Jews against their code of conduct.
Yet have double standards in their own academic work, and have been shown to be liars and plagiarists.
So my contention is she engaged in plagiarism and intellectual dishonesty and that her work was not original, that it was derivative of mine.
Notice that Samael is the accuser and enemy of Israel, and also the seducer, and that it is the same people who accuse Israel and who seduce us to erase the difference between good and evil. The Prince of Lies first attacks our sense of what is right and wrong. The snake is crafty, as the Bible tells us. And once our moral sense is destroyed, we are easily seduced. Perhaps pedophiles, they say, are just minor attracted people, and rape is okay if the victim is just a minor or just a Jew. Perhaps burning children alive is not so bad if it is to fight the supposed oppression of Israel, a democratic state that just wants to live in peace. Under these circumstances, it is, in their view, quite understandable that Hamas wants to kill all Jews. According to them, we need to understand this wish and ask, why can't Israel at least meet them halfway for the sake of peace? If you can convince people that it might be acceptable to deliberately burn children alive, as in the days of Moloch, the idol of old who rejoiced in the burning of babies, and if you can convince the UN to go along with that, there is no evil that you cannot justify. As Nietzsche wrote in his 1859 book on the genealogy of morality, nothing is true, everything is permitted. Nietzsche attributed the phrase's origin to Hassan Isaba, the founder of the Nizari Ismaili sect widely known as the Hashashin, or the Persian Order of Assassins. Moral relativism is in essence the philosophy of murderers. If you go along with accepting the murder of others, what stops others from going along with the murder of you and your loved ones? Moral relativism is the beginning of the end of all morals. Some people want peace at all cost, even if it means denying Israel's right to defend itself, because they are afraid that this situation might lead to the Third World War. But it already is a world war, an information world war, a war for truth. And if we lose it, Western civilization might be destroyed. The Jews have not yet been able to bury all their loved ones that have been massacred. And although there is video evidence shot by the terrorists themselves, people are already beginning to doubt that it happened at all, just like people have denied the Holocaust. It is the same pattern all over again. Do not let the lies of darkness distort us. If nothing is true, everything is permitted, as the Persian assassins say. It is the destruction and elimination of all our values. This is perhaps the beginning of the ultimate apocalyptic battle of good against evil, between light and darkness. A war to prevent the erasure of all ethical values. On which side will you stand when the day of judgment comes? And it will come. You don't have to believe us. Just do believe what the Islamists say themselves. They want to totally erase Western culture. When you read stories of the apocalyptic battle between good and evil, you imagine it as a form of physical or metaphysical battle with weapons. But the weapons are the weapons of the mind. It is not just the battle between good and evil, it is the culture war about what is good and evil. In many apocalyptic stories, a large part of mankind has been seduced to evil. How do you think that could happen? By first attacking our sense of what is right and what is wrong. The biblical book of Daniel identifies the enemy of Michael, the guardian angel of Israel, as the demon prince of Persia. Daniel 10:13. The modern name of Persia is Iran, the very nation that is behind Hamas and Hezbollah. Hamas is a terrorist organization and as such pure evil. And that means everybody who supports Hamas is also either evil or sick and misguided. Which means they are taking the side of evil and will suffer the consequences of doing so. You must not call them victims, and you must not call the victims offenders. This is called victim blaming, and it is evil. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil. Isaiah 5:20. If they attack innocents, you don't need any compassion for the offenders. All you need to do is stop them by any means necessary. That is the job of Gevurah, power and judgment, and it is good. Initially, we spoke of the need for balance between complementary opposites, so where does balance come into this? In order to understand this, we first need to fully understand the extremes. Even Jesus, who is supposed to be on the side of love and compassion, said, "For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Matthew 7:2. If you stand by and applaud while babies are burnt alive and celebrate the massacre of innocents, then you are no longer innocent. Let this sink in. If you do this, you are not innocent. And if by your own standards, it is okay to burn innocent people alive, then by your own standards, it is even more acceptable that you shall be burned alive. More acceptable because you are not innocent. Now, this is a harsh thing to say and may seem way over the top for people who consider themselves civilized and who have grown up in the lukewarm society of today. But if you truly think about it, you will find that this is actually pure justice. If you make it okay that a certain injustice shall happen to an innocent person, then according to your own judgment, it must be okay that the same injustice shall happen to you. Even more if your actions of making it okay make you less innocent. That is pure justice. It is surely hard, but also completely fair. It's a mistaken misconception to think that the best way to avoid causing this form of karma onto yourself is to refrain from all judgment. In Dante's Divine Comedy, there is a special place in hell called the pre-hell for those who were not actively evil, but too cowardly or too indecisive to be good. But make no mistake, this place belongs to hell. The mystic Dion Fortune calls this form of behavior the passive aspect of evil. It may be passive, but it is still evil. While there are those people who actually perceive themselves incapable of preventing evil, despite the fact that they would like to do so, deserve our compassion and our support to become stronger, there are on the other hand those who know they could do something but choose not to interfere or to remain passive or cater to both sides because it is more comfortable and easier for them. But those who stand by and choose not to prevent evil that befalls others deserve that the same evil befalls them while others stand by and do nothing. If, however, we choose not to massacre and burn alive those who applaud and celebrate when this fate befalls others, and if we choose not to massacre and burn alive those who stand by and choose to do nothing, despite the fact that they could interfere, and if it is only by condemning the evil, so if we thus do not massacre those people who according to the principle of justice deserve to be massacred the same way, but instead show them mercy and choose to only punish them by condemning their evil actions and expel them from civilized society, then that is the principle of balance between justice and mercy. If they are not subjected to the full principle of justice that they deserve, but instead are shown both judgment and mercy by simply being called out for the evil cowards they are, then that is the principle of balance between justice and mercy, called tiferet in the Bible. It is also known as mishpat, the principle of the righteous judge. Learn more about this principle in our tiferet video, link in the description. It is one of the mistakes of the West, and a vice of reset, of misplaced loving kindness, to assume that others love the lives of innocent civilians and children as much as we do. But there are evil people in the world who don't. These people are not like we are. They do not care about death. In fact, they want death, even the death of their own people, as long as it helps their murderous terrorist agenda. We have to understand that we need to be committed to erase this evil, not just try to play nice in the hope that evil will show understanding and mercy and eventually seek peace. Because that is not how evil works. A lot of people don't know the real situation and ask themselves, why can't Israel make a decent offer for peace? They don't know how many peace offerings have already been made, but rejected by the PLO and Hamas. It is not as if it has not been tried, but every peace offer of Israel has been replied to by rockets from Gaza on civilian Israeli targets. Even the recent atrocities are an attempt to sabotage peace efforts between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The news do not mention Israel's intensive peace offerings and the fact that the Arabs have ignored them all, and thus people think they do not exist. Neither do they realize how many terrorist attacks Israel has suffered. From the Oslo Accords, September 1993, until September 2000, nearly 300 Israelis were killed in attacks. During the Al-Aqsa Intifada, September 2000, December 2005, another 1,100 Israelis were killed. Since September 2000, Palestinian terrorist attacks have claimed at least 1,415 Israeli lives. Hundreds more have been wounded since then, not including the recent massacres. At least 1,329 Israeli civilians have been murdered. Since then, not including the recent massacres, at least 1,329 Israeli civilians have been murdered. This list does not include soldiers and police. Proportionally applied to the United States, that would mean, in the last 30 years, about 200,000 civilian people would have been murdered. About half as many as US soldiers died in the entire WW2. But we are not talking about soldiers, but civilians, even babies. The so-called Palestinians always waged war on the Jews. It is always easy to call for moderation if it is not your babies who are beheaded or burned alive in front of their parents, if it is not your wives, sisters, and daughters who are raped until they are bleeding and then paraded naked in the streets, not the houses of your families, which are burned with the people still inside. It is easy to call for moderation when you are at a safe distance, not having to worry when the next attack will come, unless you make sure it doesn't. Yes, they don't worry if the next attack comes, but just when it will come. For it will, unless Hamas is stopped. A lot of people have asked Israel to immediately stop any military action. And there has been a ceasefire, but it was Hamas that broke it. But still people ask Israel to stop. Imagine someone burns your baby and your parents alive and rapes your sisters. Then the murderers hide behind their own families and announce proudly that they will continue to attack your family until everyone is dead. And when you get your gun to bring the murderers and rapists to justice and stop them from repeating this ever again, someone who is far away in a safe place asks you to stop all violence immediately before any more innocent lives are lost. What would you think? If we allow Hamas, Hezbollah, and ISIS to wipe out Israel, who do you think they will come for next? It is wrong to say that Hamas has recently declared war on Israel, or even the other way around, for there were always rockets from Gaza attacking Israel as there was Hamas. But people in the West, and even in Israel, have far too long accepted that as normal. In just 2 weeks, Hamas has fired 7,000 rockets toward Israel. Ask yourself, how many rockets would have to attack your country until it would be considered an act of war? Probably far less. Perhaps just one. We need to take a stand against evil. We need to stop the hypocrisy of moral relativism and double standards directed against Israel. Consider to show your support for Israel in your profile pictures on social media if you are not afraid that this might make you a target for Islamic terrorists. And if you're afraid, then it should be even more obvious to you who the monsters are. Have you noticed that no one who shows their support for Palestine has to fear for their lives? That is not the case for Jews these days. Let the Jews not stand alone against evil. Let us call evil for what it is and make sure we do not become evil ourselves. Do not look away and do not pretend that it is far away. It affects every human being. You cannot be neutral or you are part of the problem. Below you find a playlist of other creators that help to clear up misinformation and raise awareness what really happens. Watch these videos and you will know who the monsters are. Really watch them. Don't believe them blindly, but educate yourself and check the facts, and then decide for yourself. Are you with humanity or with the monsters? And if you are with humanity, take a stand against the monsters. Let's stand with Israel and with humanity against these monsters. Let's fight against moral relativism and for ethical principles. Subscribe for our follow-up videos. How do we stop Hamas terrorists using their own people as human shields? And the source of anti-Semitism and its occult history.